All right. Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. It's my favorite day of the week, and I'm super excited to chat today with Will from tEQuitable. Just a reminder, if you're maybe tuning in for the first time, we do this every Monday, our show, Data is Love, talking about how to use data to drive decisions, especially at work and especially as it relates to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Will, hi.
Hi.
Good morning. Is it sunny in Sacramento?
I'm actually in San Francisco and it looks like the fog is about to break.
Okay. All right. So will you just start with telling us a little bit about yourself
Yeah,
and how did you get here? And also, what is tEQuitable?
awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. A little bit about me. So, I was born and raised in New York City to Ecuadorian immigrant parents. I've been in California. I was doing the math this morning, about 26 years now. A good 18 years of my career was spent in marketing, specifically in retail marketing. And I quickly learned in my career that I'm very left brain, right brain. So through my years in marketing, I kind of moved in and out of roles, of very creative roles, strategic roles, all with the goal of wanting to be a well-rounded business leader. When I decided to leave retail, it led me to management consulting, which is where I found my passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and got to work in some really, really great transformative programs. What was really amazing for me, though, is that was transformational, not just from a professional perspective, but also personal, because it finally gave me language that helped me articulate my own personal experiences and journey as a brown gay kid growing up in New York and later in California. Through DEI consulting, that led me to tEQuitable, and it's been an incredible almost couple of years working at tEQuitable. tEQuitable is we are a product development company. The company name is pronounced tEQuitable because we use technology to make workplaces more equitable. And our mission is to make sure that workplaces work for everyone. I'll get into a little bit of what we do in a minute, but that's a little bit of my story.
You don't often hear people say, I fell in love with DEI because of management consulting. So I'm just, I'm just chewing on that. And it's so funny because I also feel like I've arrived at this work through management consulting and, just the power of having language to start to describe who we are, how we fit, what is and isn't working. And so one of the speaking of language, one of the words that you all use at tEQuitable is this a word called ombuds, right? You say we're digital ombuds. And when I think of ombuds, I literally am pulled back 20 years to university and the office of the ombudsman and where I went to college in Illinois. The ombudsman was literally 100-year-old man with a very long white beard. And he was just a super kind, friendly guy. And that's it, right? Like for me, like that's my memory of like an ombuds person. And so what is an ombuds?
Great question. So ombuds, I mean, have been around for centuries, really, but in the United States since the 1960s. And as you said, they're primarily found in academia, in government, and some Fortune 500 companies like American Express or Coca-Cola. And they have teams of human ombuds, just like you said, the gentleman that you recall from 20 years ago. But an ombuds is really just a safe place where an employee can come to and figure out workplace conflict. So we are a third-party tech-enabled ombuds. We follow all the same principles and practices of any organizational ombuds. So we are independent. We are not beholden to the company's management structure. We are confidential, meaning we'll neither confirm nor deny that someone's even spoken to us. We're impartial. We don't advocate for employee. We don't advocate for company. We advocate for fairness of process. And then very intentionally, we are informal and off the record. So telling us something is not serving notice to the company. And the one other thing that I would say is, in organizations that have human ombuds, they tend to have one person for every 11 to 15,000 employees, right? And by us being tech enabled, anyone at any time can come to the platform to figure out what their issue is and learn how to move forward.
I'm just doing the math on one for 11,000 people. This person is Santa.
Right,
Basically, ombuds are Santas. That's my takeaway. Thank you. This
right.
session is over. No, but jokes aside, so I feel like we're in this moment where there is a lot of workplace tension. There's burnout. We're exhausted. I'm exhausted. And I've noticed that people really are on the edge a lot more than, even say 5 years ago. And I agree, like we need these safe places to have conversations. I think working towards a resolution is super important so that we're not, in our feelings and in our heads and deciding to quit our jobs even before we've had a conversation. That said, I remember from, okay, not quite 20 years ago, but maybe 10 years ago, working at a company that had an EAP, like a hotline, right? An employee assistance program. And so, and I have to say, like, I never used it because the idea of calling into a hotline really felt like dealing with Comcast, and like literally nobody wants to do that. So what's the difference between, like, let's say these EAPs, which a lot of big companies have, and a digital ombuds, and who's using it, and how often are you noticing people use the service?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And programs like EAP and some of these hotlines that are out there are they're great tools, and that they serve their purpose. What makes tEQuitable different is that for us, it's really important that we work on both sides of the equation, right? We're there for employees, provide a sounding board for them, give them advice, have them explore their options and how they can kind of figure out what their next step should be. While they're doing that, we collect data that we anonymize and we aggregate, and we use that to identify systemic issues within the organization. So we put a report together that we bring to management, because for us, it's really important that, we're creating this virtuous circle, right? We're helping and empowering employees, but we're also helping companies make systemic change. And I think that's what really sets us apart from some of these other tools. As I mentioned earlier, with the ombuds in an organization, 1 to 11,000, there's some stats that show that those type of organizations will see someone use the ombud service anywhere from 2 to 8% of employee base, right, a year. Again, because we are tech enabled and we really try to be there for all, we see somewhere around 22% of the employee base use our service, which is, obviously we're trying to help people.
That's that's a huge difference between 2% to 22%, right? Um, Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about psychological safety. I feel like psychological safety is like super buzzword. I see lots of DEI influencers using it. I've started to see it in like career pages and organizations where they'll say, "Come work with us because we're a psychologically safe workplace." So, what the heck is psychological safety, right? And what data do you have to back that something like a well used ombuds service can actually create greater psychological safety?
Yeah, you are right that psychological safety is the buzzword these days. And one thing that I also just want to say, a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, do you replace HR?" It's like, no, we don't replace HR. If anything, we augment HR, right? So, tons of studies show that employees are not going to HR. About 6% of individuals harassed at only about 6% of people harassed at work actually end up going to HR. So, with the stat that I gave you earlier of about 22% of people come to the platform seeking help, we're really an indicator that the product is needed, and that we're certainly collecting data and insights that HR has never had access to before. So again, that's in the spirit of like, how do we help organizations make change? The other thing is tEQuitable can also be a component in mitigating corporate risk. Informal conflict resolutions like tEQuitable have been shown to reduce external litigation costs by 50 to 80% because we're helping employees, we're helping things before they escalate, right? And helping individuals and helping companies.
Mm, I love, like, I love that that's the return on an investment. It feels so tangible to know. I mean, like, to be really crass, like, fewer people are going to sue you if you have just like healthy avenues to have conversations, right? Before things totally spin out of control. It's almost like a workplace therapist, right? Like somebody who can sort of ask the right questions, nudge you in the right direction. But then it's not just a conversation, like you actually have data about what the conversation was about, right?
That's
So
right.
that over time you can start to see, hey, like these are the things that are coming up. And I'm curious, like, what are the kinds of things, right, in this moment of people feeling burnt out and exhausted and on edge? What are the kinds of topics that you're seeing come out?
Yeah, a lot. It depends, right, on what's happening in an organization. And as we are collecting data, what helps us figure out, okay, what's going on the ground, like the pulse of the day-to-day culture. And folks will come on to talk about pay equity, right? That they don't feel like that they're getting paid as much as their counterparts. They'll come on to the platform a lot of times to just be like, I feel stuck. I don't know how to move forward either with this issue or how to talk to my manager. And I think I might just want to quit. And through talking to an ombuds, it's like, well, have you spoken to your manager ever? Well, no, not really. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's tease that out. An ombuds is never there to tell someone what to do, but to help them get to a really comfortable place of what their next step should be. I'll give you a really quick story because it recently happened. So a
Tell
few
us, tell
months
us.
yeah, so a few months ago, this visitor went onto the platform to figure some stuff out. Through the platform and through our content, was able to realize that what she needed to do is she needed to give her manager and her manager's manager some feedback. But then she went ahead and made an appointment to also speak to an ombuds and came prepared and said, okay, so I think I know what I need to do. I just need some frameworks on how to go about having this conversation. So through this conversation, it also started coming up that this person had already been doing a lot on their own of how to create and foster a better dynamic for her colleagues. So the ombud said, it sounds like, have you ever thought of being a manager? And imposter syndrome came up, that she comes from a culture where you just heads down, work hard, and hopefully it'll come. So again, just in nudging, as you said, the ombud said, when you have this conversation, you might want to say, and one day I would like to be considered to be a manager, right? Here are some of the things that I've already been doing. I really believe in the mission of our organization. So that happened. Literally last week, this person went to our marketing website. So didn't go to their instance that is available to her organization, but came onto the marketing website to say, this is the conversation I had with the ombuds. This is how wonderful this ombuds pushed me to think bigger than. And a month after my conversation with my director, I got a promotion. And I now have a seat at the table to help make things even more equitable in my organization. Like chills, right? Just chills, just seeing that full circle.
I love that story. I love the story so much. I love that story so much for a couple of different reasons. One, I think there's this idea that technology and AI and Web 3.0, like all of these things are just going to solve for all of the messy, sticky parts of our life, right? Like if you are on Twitter or you're on any like startup blog, it really feels like technology is going to change our lives completely. And I think it is changing our lives, but there's this human element. We grow as people through conversations.
That's exactly right.
We grow as people and as leaders through coaching. And I love that. you all never say, look, our technology is going to make your workplace better. I love that it's still grounded in a really core human need, which is to talk through our problems, right?
That's right.
And get out of our heads a little bit. Um, I'm curious, right? Like you shared a story of like one individual using the platform, finding the words, advocating, getting promoted. That's incredible, right? And it's valuable, obviously, for their employer because they get to keep them at an organizational level, right? What does success look like, and how do you know if an organization is actually being successful altogether?
Yeah, so some of our, so we like to say that with our customers, it's a partnership, right? They're bringing us on to help give their employees, these safe spaces to talk about issues. We, on a quarterly or biannual basis, put together reports that we come back and say, here are the systemic issues that your employees are talking about. But here are actionable recommendations on what you can do in your organization to make that change. Some of our most successful partnerships have been customers that really truly want to make that change, will listen. Some of them will call us their accountability partner, right? Because we're bringing to the table, like, here's everything that we're hearing about your people, and then we'll want to go do something about it, right? So then, whether it's at a town hall or they communicate to their employees, here are the things that we learned through tEQuitable, through maybe a couple of other tools that we may have, and here's the change that we're going to make, right? And that full feedback loop is what's made us be great partners, because employees then know, we go to tEQuitable, my company is going to learn about it and they're going to make change. So we've had some instances where, we obviously look at the data week to week, and all of a sudden one company like lights up with a lot of stories over the same thing. Well, we don't want to wait to get to the report, right? We'll call up our main contact and say, hey, something's going on because about 6, 7 people have written on the platform over the same issue. And they're like, thank you so much. And we're going to go find out what that's all about. And they'll redo whatever they messed up, they'll fix it. And that's truly, like, for us, the best partnership, when employees know that by using tEQuitable, their companies will make change.
Yeah. And you all are making data really actionable. I've heard you use the word action probably 10 times already in the last 15 minutes, right? Like accountability, action, do something about it, right? So data, I think, is only good if you do something with it.
Right.
Otherwise, I think that there are lots of employee listening softwares that are telling employers what people are chatting about, right? Because they're pulling data from emails and Slack messages and all kinds of things. But there isn't the accountability and the action piece, right? It's only knowing what's happening, but you're like, well, what do I do about it? So I love that. I want to change gears for a second and talk about learning. Once a teacher, I think always a teacher. And as a former educator, I think a lot about on the job training, not only for technical aspects of our job, but also the inter and the intrapersonal pieces, especially right now. But I feel like I've been saying that the entire time I've been at work. I'm like, especially right now, this is a really important moment, right? Um, our our workplaces are changing pretty rapidly. There are lots of new expectations around how employees want their leaders, their managers, their companies to show up. And I also see just a lot more diversity, which, as an immigrant woman of color, makes me so happy. Which kind of changes the game a little bit. Now you're needing to communicate and manage in an environment that was different even 10 years ago. So how are you all thinking about that piece, right? Like upskilling people. What does learning look like, or skill building look like through this platform?
Yeah, thank you for that. We are obviously a platform where folks can come to figure out conflict, but we are also a learning platform. A lot of times in what we call our story entry page, people will write in and say, I'm just here to learn how to be a better ally. And they'll end up in some of the content that is just for that, right? We have a library, what we call stories, where people can kind of feel validated, where they hopefully can see themselves reflected in a similar situation. Each of our stories are in narrative form, cover 4 topics: what happened to me, how did they make me feel, what did I do about it, and then therefore what was the outcome. And the idea is, by seeing yourself reflected in a similar situation, it could help you move to a positive outcome. When people are ready to take action, we have another library of learning modules, or I've started calling them action modules, where they're all in a framework of a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, to really help build skill and get a person to what they need to do. So some of our learning modules are strategize, learn how to have tough conversations, learn how to speak and listen with empathy, how to handle backhanded compliments like, oh, you're African American, but you're so articulate. And we've started to build more and more learning modules for new managers, just because our customers have been asking for them, right? So we have one, how to run an inclusive meeting, how to build equitable hybrid teams. So definitely what I love about tEQuitable is that it's also a learning platform.
You said, so I can see myself in it. And the 4 steps, especially this bit around naming your feelings, it almost feels like Sesame Street or Mr. Rogers, but for adults. And one of my colleagues, Nicole Decay, who's our head of people sciences, she often talks about like how powerful those things were for kids, right? How powerful Mr. Rogers was for kids, because the value of validating what someone is going through and then helping them have language to start to tease it apart and make sense of it. And as adults, like we desperately, we need it. We need to
Right.
be better at using our words.
And as you know, we can, as humans, just get in our heads and start to think like, oh, it's only me. I'm the only one feeling this way. And by, seeing yourself reflected in someone else's story, you're like, I'm not alone. And now I have some tips on what I could do.
Yeah. And how do you decide like what learning content to build as you're evolving tEQuitable?
That's a great question. It's from various different places, right? So part of our job is to just constantly be doing research and understanding workplace trends. So as topics and things come up, that's part of how we build content. We also listen to our customers. We are constantly asking our customers, like, what hot topics are you dealing with? What are things that are coming up over and over again? And then our team decides, could we do that topic in a story? Could we do that topic in a learning module? But we're just constantly listening to people and asking, what is it that they need?
I love that. Okay, I have sort of one last question. And it's this. What are you learning? Because tEQuitable is a pretty new organization, right? Just a couple of years old. What are you learning from building this platform, from the data that you're collecting, that leaders need to know, so that they themselves can work towards building more empathic organizations? Top 3 things or top 4 things that you're learning.
So, with psychological safety, like, employees are willing to share ideas on how to make workplaces better. They want to, right? And leaders just need to, first of all, provide these spaces, but then also be able to be open to listen and wanting to make change. And a lot of times what we sometimes bring to is, the solutions don't need to overhaul an entire system or process, right? They could be simple things to just help employees feel heard, listened to, and that they're cared for by their leaders and their workplaces.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so don't assume that people don't want to share, right? People are willing. If you create the right container, people are going to come and have the conversation with you. And the more conversations you have with people, the more, honestly, like, data you have to start to see the trends. And the second, being open to listen. Of course, I think all of us need to work on that, but in particular, I think for leaders, they themselves have to get out of their heads, right? But the thing that you said, the last point around the changes that you need to make might be very small. You don't have to overhaul systems. And I think that quite frankly, especially with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot of people are worried that they're going to have to overhaul their entire organizations, like teams, departments, all kinds of things. But it's in the small steps that are taken consistently that make a big that make a really, really big difference. Anything else that we should know about before we let everybody go?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we're doing at tEQuitable is, Lisa, our CEO, likes to say, we are in it because we want to make change, right? So we want, when we say partner, we truly mean partner. We are partnering with these organizations to figure out
Mhm.
how they can move the needle in being in support of their employees and their culture. So we just want to look for all the leaders that want to make great change, and we welcome all of them.
I see the subtle hints that you're dropping down. All right, leaders need to come to the table, right? It's
That's
not
right.
possible. You can't force feed a leader to make changes or an organization to make changes if they're not ready. So I love the challenge by choice nature of the work that you do as well. And so I guess like if there are people that are leaders and decision makers inside of their organizations that are listening into this conversation, yeah, like we want to nudge you. We want to nudge you to talk to your people, to be on the ground, and take some baby steps, right? It's unlikely to harm your organization. I think the chances are that even in taking those baby steps, people are just gonna know that you care more. And
That's
we
right.
all know the data on what an engaged workforce is capable of doing, right? Like
That's
the
exactly right.
possibility for growth, the possibility for innovation is endless. So Will, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I love, 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 love what you all are building. And I love that you're taking something like an ombuds person and kind of making it cool and sexy, right?
Thank you so
So,
much for having me. This was wonderful.
all right. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back next week on Monday to talk about employee experience surveys. Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a good one.